Our planet contains a multitude of species that have only been glimpsed once, if ever at all. Since we know more about the surface of the moon than our own oceans, is it surprising that sailors would have fabricated tall tales about the creatures that lurk in the murky depths beneath their feet? One such creature is the Kraken, a legendary sea monster said to dwell in the depths of the frigid seas between Norway and Iceland, haunting shipping routes and pirate ships alike. Possibly inspired by real sightings of giant squid or octopuses, the Kraken was said to have enormously long and powerful arms that would wrap around an unsuspecting ship and drag the crew down to a watery grave. In today's video, we'll take a look at the Kraken, giant sea crab, giant crab, or perhaps something else completely. Welcome to Walk the Plank. The history of the Kraken. First mentioned by no less than King Sverre of Norway, who claimed that it was, quote, colossal in size, as big as an island. The Kraken has had as many descriptions as there have been mentions of it. The details vary from telling to telling, with some claiming that it looks more crab than squid, and others claiming that its skin was black or green. King Sverre said that it was one of the many sea monsters that terrorized the seas between Norway and Iceland, but that it was capable of sinking ships with ease. In later years, the Kraken was described in a travelogue by Francesco Negri, an Italian priest who traveled extensively in Scandinavia in the late 1600s and who was fascinated by the flora and fauna of the far north. The majority of his work talked about real, tangible creatures, and yet among his descriptions of seals and fish, he also talked about something he termed a skyrkrak, a many-armed fish native to Scandinavia. After Negri first described the Kraken, its fame began to grow as more writers began trying to track it down. In 1729, a Danish writer called Hans Egede likened the Kraken to the Icelandic Hafgufa, although he struggled to fully make the comparison as he had very little information about what this mythical beast looked like. According to Egede, the Kraken was many miles long and had multiple heads and was covered in claws. He claimed that the beast took over the ocean when it surfaced and was large enough that you could walk on it like it was land. Egede warned of the dangers of the Kraken though, saying that it fed upon ships, men, fish, and animals alike. If a sailor was unfortunate enough to get it tangled on his hook, the only way to avoid a watery doom was to speak its name to banish it to the depths. Despite the growing interest in the Kraken in Scandinavia, it hasn't quite made it to the global stage yet. The person to spark global public interest for the Kraken was a Norwegian bishop called Erik Pontoppidan, who published the first attempt at a natural history of Norway in 1743. He's generally cited as the authority on sea serpents and krakens and makes a number of assertions regarding the beast. At one point he says that the Kraken was sometimes mistakenly assumed to be a group of islands, and at another he warns sailors to be cautious of fishing near the Kraken, as you may get caught in the whirlpool that it creates as it sinks below the surface. Many cultures actually have a similar legend around a tentacled beast that would harass sailors, ranging from Pliny and Aristotle in ancient Greece, as well as the Lusca in the Caribbean and the Scylla from the Odyssey, all violent squid things. Squid, crab, or Hafgufa? The descriptions of the Kraken have varied over the years, with it being likened to a giant crab as well as a mythical whale from Iceland known as the Hafgufa. This similarity to the Icelandic Hafgufa comes from Egede's description in 1729, which talked about the most enormous monster in the sea. The sagas speak of the Hafgufa as well, saying that it would swallow men and ships whole as well as snacking on whales. By the end of the 18th century, the Kraken was commonly accepted to be some sort of enormous octopus or squid. Some still argue that the Kraken was more crab-like, even going so far as to claim that it had claws on the end of its tentacles. Pontoppidan, the Norwegian bishop, had a lot to say about the Kraken, even going so far as to say that the carcass of a young Kraken had washed ashore in Norway 1680. The description of this apparent teen Kraken said that it had long arms and that it had been crawling along the beach but got stuck and died. It's more than likely that this was just the remains of a giant squid that washed ashore. These creatures can grow to be about 46 feet long, and so while they're not the 200-foot monstrosity that the Kraken was reported to be, they are both enormous and deadly. It's perhaps unsurprising that people used to tell tall tales about these creatures, as giant squid and octopuses are completely unlike anything that you can see on land. Their bodies and tentacles have no comparison to a land mammal, and so seeing one out at sea or even the collapsed carcass on the beach would naturally lead you to start guessing as to what manner of beast it may be. Giant squid were only classified in the Western world in the mid-19th century, and we still don't fully understand the life cycle or inner workings of the giant squid. The Kraken in fiction. Capturing the world's imagination for centuries, the Kraken has appeared numerous times in various works of fiction, from novels to comics, films to video games, although it wasn't named Kraken in any film until the second Pirates of the Caribbean film.
The Kraken!
For example, the Kraken appeared in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a story written by Jules Verne where Captain Nemo and his submarine are attacked by a beast known only as a pulp, or calmar, or octopus and squid. The creature is described as an immense cuttlefish with a horned beak furnished with several rows of pointed teeth. The Kraken was also found in poems by Alfred Tennyson and in Moby Dick by Herman Melville. In the second Pirates of the Caribbean film, the Kraken is fully fleshed out into a terrifying beast that follows the orders of Davy Jones. Enormous with razor-sharp teeth and plenty of tentacles, this iteration of the Kraken shows a pirate's worst fears come to life.
Hello, beastie.
According to the myths in the film, the Kraken would hunt unwary ships, stalking them before capsizing the ship, as its tentacles could reach the top of the ship's mast and pull it over with ease. Apparently, these suckers were strong enough to pull the flesh clean off a man's face, and the beast itself would only answer to Davy Jones. Little known facts about the Kraken. The Kraken was preceded by fish rising to the surface. According to legend, if a sailor saw surfacing fish, a multitude of jellyfish, or even just a lot of bubbles coming to the surface, they'd know that the Kraken was coming for them. Although they knew the warning signs, it was rarely helpful as the Kraken's size meant that the ship didn't have enough time to get away. Kraken poop made excellent fish bait. As the Kraken had a mainly fish-based diet, it was generally assumed that its waste must be pretty fishy too. According to Pontoppidan, the Kraken's waste was so attractive to other fish that it would lure them in, providing the Kraken with yet more fish to feast upon, thus continuing the cycle. The Kraken's hunting method was considered so effective that Norse fishermen would seek out the Kraken to take advantage of the multitude of fish that swarmed around it. Carl von Linne, otherwise known as Linnaeus, thought that the Kraken was a real creature. Famous zoologist Carl von Linne actually recorded the Kraken as a real organism in his Systema Naturae, which was released in 1735. Von Linne was respected as a scientist and considered to be the father of modern taxonomy. Dinosaurs might have fought Krakens. Okay, this one is kinda hard to prove, but it's possible that there may actually have been a creature that was very similar to a Kraken. Ichthyosaurs were large marine reptiles that looked like modern dolphins but could measure up to 13 meters long and were fierce predators. The remains of these creatures have been discovered in patterns that look similar to how the modern octopus leaves its waste, and even more strikingly, one ichthyosaur skeleton was found showing signs of constriction. A tentacle large enough to suffocate an ichthyosaur would have had to have belonged to an incredibly large cephalopod, perhaps even a kraken. One French zoologist insisted the Kraken was real and lost his job because of it. In the 1700s, zoology and studying the natural world was a keen passion for many, including one man called Pierre Denis de Montfort, whose particular sphere was the giant cephalopod. He'd taken up these studies after hearing tales about giant tentacles being discovered on beaches around the coast. De Montfort studied old artwork and ship disappearances, claiming that these proved the existence of the Kraken. In 1782, 10 ships went missing and never arrived at their destinations. De Montfort gleefully went around saying that these disappearances were clearly the work of the Kraken, until the truth came out that these 10 ships had sunk in a hurricane. De Montfort was disgraced and his reputation never recovered. The Kraken wasn't magical. For all its fearsome strength and enormous size, the Kraken was still a mortal creature that could die and had no magical abilities aside from its awesome strength. The Kraken may have been a volcano. As mentioned before, the signs of a Kraken attack included seeing a lot of fish at the surface or perhaps a huge number of bubbles rising to the top of the water. Some people have suggested that this could be an entirely natural phenomenon linked to volcanic activity. The tales of the Kraken are generally centered in the cold waters of the north near the highly active volcanic land of Iceland. Gas bubbles could roil up out of the depths, and poor sailing and bad weather led the ships to their doom. Krakens were known in Greek mythology as well as Scandinavian tales. Although it's not entirely accurate, it's possible that the Scylla from Greek mythology might be their version of a kraken. Scylla is described as having 6 long necks with 6 heads and sharp teeth, as well as 12 feet. She's also described as taking the form of a whirlpool in some versions of the story, and in the 1981 film Clash of the Titans, they definitely made Scylla into the Kraken. The English word kraken or sea monster derives from the Norwegian word kraken or kraki, meaning malformed crooked tree. This word comes from the Old Norse krokur, which literally means crook. The idea is that maybe we call this ferocious monster a kraken because it resembled a stump with crooked branches. If you've ever seen a squid, you might see the resemblance. For a creature that has stalked the pages of sailors' imaginations for centuries, the kraken remains elusive. It's possible that the early sailors did see something that terrified them, and that the stories they told to make sense of this beast are really just talking about the giant squid. Thank you for watching this episode of Walk the Plank. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these videos, and I'll see you next week for another one. Have a great week. Cheers.